let us go on. In those days...
Why don't we get serious?
Well, because I think people are still, I am serious. People are interested in you. People are still trying to understand you. I'm sorry you find that you find these questions unserious. We have a different idea, perhaps, of what serious is, but let me go on.
No, I'm not objecting to the questions, you know.
I'm very serious.
Not at all.
In those early days after Watergate, I don't know whether you'll find this serious, but I'm serious about it. Were there times when you thought you might go under emotionally?
Not at all.
You always felt that you were able to handle it? There were not times when it was just overwhelming?
Physically, I came pretty close to going under, as you may recall. I had this phlebitis in the operation, and I was a bleeder, and it was pretty close. And I thought then I probably wasn't going to make it. There was one morning. But emotionally, never. It's just part of my makeup. Didn't pay enough.
Mr. Nixon, we touched on some aspects of your personal life. I'd like to spend this period in discussing it just a bit more. I talked today with one of the men who had worked for you and had gone to jail as a result of Watergate. And I asked him if he could ask you one question, what would it be? And this was it. He said that many men went to jail as a result of Watergate, and you did not. He asked if you feel any responsibility for these men today, and although he had never heard from you himself, have you contacted any of the others to express your concern?
Well, I've contacted, I think, a considerable number of those who had to go to prison because of the Watergate thing. And I must say that I feel a very deep responsibility to them. I knew their families. I was concerned about them. And what specific ones would you like to know about?
Well, the man who gave me this question was John Ehrlichman.
I haven't contacted Ehrlichman. I have felt that he probably would not really appreciate being contacted. But, for example, Haldeman, Mitchell, Chapin, Kalmbach.
You've been in touch with all of them?
Oh, yes, sure. I've seen them all, yes. And I correspond with them regularly, sure.
There are people, Mr. Nixon, who resent the fact that we are giving you airtime tonight because they feel that while holding the highest office of the land, you let them down terribly. They resent the fact that after all of this, you have enough personal money to buy a $750,000 townhouse, that you have a 16-room office that rents for $66,000 a year. I'm sure you've read all of this in the paper, and people have talked about this, as well as Secret Service men paid for by the taxpayers, and that you also have a pension of $66,000 a year just from the presidency, and all this makes them angry. How do you answer these people, Mr. Nixon?
I can understand their anger.
That's it?
Yes, that's the answer.
Do you feel that you have anything to apologize for?
No, for what I have earned? Not at all. No, I must say that as far as what I own at the present time, I worked hard for it. I did very well on my book, my first one. And from that, I was able, of course, to make payments on my house. I sold my house in California for a good profit. I sold my house in Florida for a good profit. I put that into my place in New York, but everything I have, I've earned. Nobody has given me anything. I haven't inherited anything. No, I'm not a bit ashamed of that. What else is your question?
I wonder how people react to you when they see you on the streets now that you've moved to New York. Do you feel this anger? Do they ignore you? Do they come up and say, how are things? What is it like for you?
Well, they're very friendly. You know, New York's that kind of a town. Any town that will support the Mets is always for an underdog.
So you feel good about being here?
Oh, yes.
I wondered if at this point we could do something with you that we did with Gerald Ford recently. And that is, I'd like to ask you about some people and ask you a quick assessment of them. What comes into your mind as I say the names? Jimmy Carter.
Very intelligent, hard worker, very decent, an excellent campaigner, and unfortunately, a tragedy for him, a tragedy for country, an ineffective president.
Ronald Reagan.
Intelligent, strong, much younger than his years would indicate, and his appearance, vigorous, and in spite of the media, to a certain extent, some of it painting him as being a lightweight and a kook, a very reasonable, responsible man.
You have no unfortunately's to say about him. You have nothing on the debit side about him.
No, he hasn't been president yet.
George Bush.
My political career is over, and so we'll now go to other questions.
I realize that I left
you can ask political
That's
questions
all.
you want.
But I realize
Your
in
show.
This, I realize in this I left one name out, and that is Edward Kennedy.
Suffers from comparison with both of his brothers, and particularly with Jack Kennedy. I think his greatest weakness is not Chappaquiddick, although that, of course, has hurt him. But his greatest weakness, curiously enough, is where Jack Kennedy was strong, and I should know, television. Jack Kennedy had a cool personality on television. And Teddy Kennedy, who is, some people tell me, better looking than Jack who comes over quite well when he's speaking to a rally, comes through very hot and rasping on television. I think that is one of the things that makes him weaker.
In 1972, you wrote in your diary, the country simply can't afford the likes of Ted Kennedy, and you added George McGovern, as even a possible presidential candidate in the future. Still feel that way?
Well, certainly about George McGovern, and yet, and as between Carter and Kennedy, and I'd say I don't want this to hurt Carter, but I would strongly favor Carter if I were a Democrat. Now, incidentally, may I say, in fairness to Ted Kennedy, I admire his political guts, too. He's hanging in there. He's down, but he's not out. Bush is out.
In just a few seconds we have left now, and there's almost just time for a yes or no. Are you sorry you didn't burn the tapes?
You know, interestingly enough, everybody in Europe that I talked to said, why didn't you burn the tapes? And the answer is, I probably should have. But mainly, I shouldn't have even installed them, because Johnson's system was there, I had it taken out, and I shouldn't have ever put them in the first place.
But if you had it to do all over again, you'd burn them?
Yes, I think so, because they were private conversations subject to misinterpretation, as we have all seen.
Thank you for being with us, Mr. Nixon.